Welcome to Tommy Solo's Famous Friends. This is where I get to chat with people I've connected with over the years in the world of arts and entertainment. And today I'm very pleased to have with me producer, singer, songwriter, Chris Birkett. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thanks, Tommy. Thanks for the invite. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you. So, I know that you are a renowned producer and you've got a lot of credits to your name. You mentioned well before we started recording Buffy Sainte-Marie, and that's quite the feather in your cap. I also know that you've produced Sinead O'Connor, and with Nothing Compares to You. So that's
Yeah.
quite another huge feather in your cap. So let's get started and go back to England for a minute. I understand that you started playing guitar when you were 8 years old.
Yeah. So briefly, the story is that I came from a very poor family. My mother and father broke up when I was 4 years old. So me and my sister kind of grew up on our own in the house. And my dad was a long distance truck driver. So there was no money or no encouragement to play music, obviously, in the place where I grew up. In fact, my peers and my friends were all like, getting up to really bad stuff. So what I did, I was desperate to play music instead of getting into trouble. So I managed to get some banjo strings off somebody and second-hand ones, so I thought, well, I've got to try and build something to put these on. So I found some wood in the garbage and some nails and built this box guitar. It's my first instrument, and it's kind of sounded a bit like a koto, so doing doing kind of sound. But I could make harmonies and music on it. So I just dedicated myself, to learning. I was actually left-handed when I was born, so I learned left-handed, the other way around, like this. And then when I was 12, I managed to save up enough money to get my first proper guitar. It was a Japanese, it's called a Top 20. It's a Fender Stratocaster copy. It's red, and it was a proper guitar. I could tune it up properly. But I decided then and there to switch to right-handed because I couldn't afford the left-handed model. The left-handed model was almost twice as much, supply and demand sort of stuff. So I just switched over at the age of 12, and I'm really glad I did, because you go to a jam session these days, which I do quite often. It's the chance of finding a left-handed guitar is like really remote. I mean, Paul McCartney and Jimi Hendrix did pretty well, but I think that for me, I was just glad that I changed to right-handed. But I play drums left-handed. I play bass still right-handed, but and keyboards doesn't matter which. My left hand is very strong on a piano, obviously, because that's my
Your dominant hand, yeah.
dominant hand. Yeah.
So let's get to the reason that we're doing this call today. You have a brand new album out, and it's called "She's My Guitar." Now, I've had a listen, and these songs are great, and we hope that you do really well with this album. But from what I understand, this album was inspired by an acoustic guitar project. What was that all about?
Yeah, it's the acoustic guitar project is an international project where they go to various cities in the world and find a musician in that city, and they give them a guitar for 1 week, and under the condition that you write a song and perform it on video within that week, and then sign the guitar after. So Roseanne Baker Thornley is a friend of mine. She brought the guitar over to me. They chose me for Toronto for some reason, and so I grabbed the guitar, and this song just came out of it. It's funny because some instruments have songs in them. I find that if you sit at certain pianos and certain guitars, they actually sing to you, especially if you listen. And this song came out literally within 10 minutes. It's done, finished. So I recorded it on video and sent it off, and they published it. And I signed the guitar alongside a lot of other really well-known guitar players. So I was pretty chuffed about that. And that's the song "She's My Guitar." I decided to write a love song to my guitar because guitar has saved my life many times during my life as an adolescent and a teenager and an adult. It's been life-saving. I'll give you just one example. When I was 12 and I got my first electric, I was so excited. I was just sat at home with all my records, and I was learning the guitar solo for "Highway Star" by Deep Purple.
Mm.
This Richie Blackmore came from my town, and we had the same guitar teacher. And I saw them at my college, and I was so impressed. It made an epiphany. I was standing next to right in front of Richie, and he's playing this solo, Highway Star. And I said, "At that point in time, I said, right, I am not going to be an electronics engineer, which I was studying at the time. I want to be that guy." And I literally ran away from home the week after. But so the story I wanted to tell you is that while I was learning that solo, which is one of the best guitar solos ever, my friends and peers were all out getting into trouble. They're robbing a Chinese restaurant, and then they got caught and went to prison. And if it hadn't been for my guitar, my passion for guitar playing, I would have been in that group of people. That's the people I was hanging around with. And so it really, there's one example of how guitar has really been a savior for me. And that's why I wanted to call this album "She's My Guitar." Every song on this album came through the guitar.
Well, that's a
It's not,
fascinating story, but you know what's running through my head right now? Da
yeah.
da 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 da
Yeah,
da 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 da.
exactly. Isn't that beautiful solo? And then he
It
does
is.
that with John Lord.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
played together on the. That was beautiful.
That is a brilliant solo, and I was also inspired very much by Richie Blackmore. I don't know if you can see the guitars behind me here.
Yeah, I noticed.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, slightly jealous.
well, and I'm looking at what you've got behind you.
Oh,
Yeah.
I got some nice guitars down here which you can't see, but this is a 1980 Eric Clapton model Stratocaster,
Okay.
and it actually has the same pickups as Mark Knopfler uses on the Dire Straits guitar player.
Okay.
Really nice sound, and I put on a rollerball nut
Oh, I see. Okay.
because I'm a big fan of Jeff Beck. He's one of the best whammy bar
Yeah.
players in the world, and I phoned up Steve's Music here in Toronto, and I said, how does Jeff Beck do all that whammy barring and is not going out of tune?
It's not rolling nut.
It does, right? So they said, well, the trick is I was going to put a Floyd Rose on here, and they said, don't do that because you ruin the guitar, right? Floyd Rose locked,
Yeah.
which I got on some of my other guitars. So they said it's just a rollerball nut. So you have to just when the strings move, they move right back to where they came from because it's not on a nut that squeaks and
Right.
slips. It's on a rollerball nut, so it's always fluid, and it works perfectly. So I can actually whammy bar till the cows come home without it going out of tune. So it's pretty cool.
Very
And I've
nice. Very
got a
nice. That's
Telecaster.
interesting. I have
Oh, you got the same the same guitar.
well,
Is that a
it's not the
Strat?
same. This is my custom built solo caster.
Solo caster. What a
Yeah,
cool
and it
name.
started
Yeah.
out
Let me look at that. That's beautiful fretboard. Look at that.
well, it started out with the
Oh,
fretboard. That's all it was.
yeah.
And to kind of sum it up, I was offered an endorsement deal by a luthier, and when he started to work on the guitar I wanted, not long after he passed away. So a few years after that, a mutual friend of mine handed me this fretboard and said this came from Buddy's inventory. And I thought, well, that's great. What am I going
Yeah.
to do with it? So to make a long story short, we built
Yeah.
a guitar around the fretboard.
Super. Is that actually a Stratocaster body?
It's uh it's a Stratocaster body.
Hmm.
It's got the Fender
Pickups.
American Standard stock on top. These are the
Yep.
white parchment noiseless pickups.
Cool.
The
Nice.
neck and the headstock were carved out of a solid block of maple.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Has
Anyway,
it got a truss rod and everything?
yeah, it's got a dual
Yeah.
truss rod.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yeah, it
You
turns
need
both
that.
ways. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And I put extra springs,
Oh, good for a bit. So you do whammy barring yourself then,
a
eh?
little bit, mostly
Yeah.
in studio.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. I'm scared to do it on stage in case it does actually
Yeah.
come out. But I do sometimes when I'm feeling courageous.
So back to the new album. We've
Yeah.
talked enough about me and my guitars.
You have to write your own album now about guitars.
So I'm enjoying this album. She's my guitar. I would consider that like sort of caliente style. And as I listen to the whole album, it's got kind of a smooth Latin feel overall, I think.
Yeah.
So where did
Yeah,
that
that's
come from?
That's because I'm half Greek. So, in my collection of guitars, I have, I'll just show you here, I've got a couple of bazookas from Greece. I
Okay.
think you can see it up there on
Yeah.
the wall. And
Yeah.
just right next to it is an Irish bouzouki. It's the same instrument, but flat back model. So I'm actually half Greek. My mother was born on the island of Syros, and you'll notice there's a song called Syros on
Yes.
the album, which I wrote for her a long time ago, but I just decided to put it on this album because it's a guitar album, and the bouzouki is, you know, it's a guitar really, but it's a Greek guitar. So that's why a lot of my songs on this record are Latin, have a Latin type of feel to them. It's I'm trying to get the light better here. There you go. Yeah, so it's I just love. I've worked in Cuba. I recorded with the Buena Vista Social Club in Havana, and I'm just a big fan of those kind of grooves. Those Latin grooves are just wonderful.
Well, it's a truly wonderful album. I'm really enjoying it. And
Thank you.
as I was giving it a kind of a scan, my wife walked by and said, "Who's that? I could listen to that music." So that
Oh,
says,
great! Thank you. That's very nice. Thanks. You made my day.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So again, you're renowned as a producer, and you've produced some really top-notch acts. I wonder what was Sinead O'Connor like to work with
Uh,
as a producer?
yeah, I've been interviewed a lot about Sinead, especially when she died. Everybody was phoning me,
Mhm.
from all over the world. Um, she, Sinead had some kind of what I'd call personal issues, mental health issues, and like a lot of artists do actually. And the music they're doing tends to be a therapy in a way, which music is. I call it the universal language, but it's also very therapeutic to be involved in music, especially if you can express yourself. So Sinead used music to express her feelings and also some of her history, which is very strong. She grew up in a kind of very strong Catholic family in Ireland, and with all the trappings of that particular teaching. In other words, the sin and hell and damnation and all that stuff that some religions talk about, which I don't believe actually exists. But no, I won't get into that right now. But she was a victim of a lot of cruelty, and that kind of stayed with her really. And the funny thing is, one of her best friends. This is what she told me. One of the only people that was really kind to her as a kid was her grandmother.
Mm.
And when her grandmother died, it happened to coincide with doing the video for Nothing Compares to You, and hence the tear, the real tears from her eyes when she was singing the song.
Mm.
She was thinking about. I asked her. I said, "How did you manage to cry? On screen? That's pretty good. That's like a professional actor thing, She said, "I wasn't acting. I was thinking about my grandmother." And that video actually made the difference between a hit and a miss, actually, because I don't know whether you're aware of it. When that record was released, Nothing Compares to You, uh, it was the BBC who had all the power in those days, British
Right.
Broadcasting Corporation. They had a show called Top of the Pops. It got to 42 in the UK charts, and they decided it wasn't going to be a hit, so it started going out. And that would have been the end of it, and nobody would have ever heard the song. But they did the video, and the video was so strong, it's picked up the sales, and then suddenly just like snowballed, and it was like number one in every country. So thank heavens for the video. This is what
It's
visual.
interesting how the music business has changed so much over the years and how much of an impact video had on the industry.
Yeah, it used to.
And
Yeah, MTV was a very strong force back in the 80s, and the 90s, but not so
I
much now.
feel like for a while it was more important how you looked than how you
Yeah,
sounded.
yeah,
Classic example, Milli Vanilli. It was all about
yeah.
a look
Fake.
really in the end, right?
It's all fake. Yeah, there's all studio musicians. A lot of records are just done by really great studio musicians, and that when people are just miming the performance.
And it's,
Yeah, it's done.
when we think about the Wrecking Crew, for example, and all these, the Motown artists
Yeah,
that played on all these records,
yeah,
and a lot of these bands that were given the credit for the hits, never toured because they frankly couldn't play.
Yeah, well, it's kind of going on today as well, actually, in a different way. But it's kind of a criminal thing to steal people's intellectual property, and that's been happening a lot right from the days of W.C. Handy, who actually was the first person to write down the blues. So of course he got all the royalties from those manuscripts, but the people who made the blues were still living on the street and starving, and that's been going on in various forms all the way through, and it's still going on now. There's people who don't know anything about music and never like put the effort in to learn to play an instrument. They're now using AI to make songs, and it's going out. They're going out on Spotify. It's just nuts, So the same kind of theft is going on even now, but and in a bigger way, actually, in a more broader sense. So that's a negative for music as far as I'm concerned. But there's a positive to it as well. It's not all, every stick has two ends, I believe. So
That's true, but this is to me why it's refreshing to listen to an album like your new album, because
yeah, I
it,
played everything on that record except for the flute. There's
and yeah,
a couple of,
kudos for that as well. I mean, uh, I I spent a lot of time working on guitar and my vocals and on keyboards, but I can't sit down and play drums to save my life. And my wife says that's because drummers are wired differently. So I don't
yeah.
know.
It's the standard musician joke, right? We got how many people in your band? We've got four musicians and a drummer.
Yeah.
But I was born a drummer. Actually, I guess I'm fortunate, and I'm full of gratitude for that. When I was a kid, I was in the Sea Cadets,
Okay.
and I didn't want to be a sailor, but I wanted to play military snare in the band.
Okay.
And the funny thing is, I went into the class, and the guy showed us the first rudiments. It's called Black Bear. It's one of the first things I learned, and I got it straight away. And all the other kids were like spending weeks and weeks trying to learn this rhythm. I just jammed straight into it. So I'm fortunate that I have a natural gift of rhythm. I don't know where it comes from. My dad was not rhythmic or couldn't sing or anything, but it probably comes from my Greek DNA.
Okay.
Because some of my cousins like play bouzouki and sing. So
And your bass playing is solid too. And I find that a lot of times when you hand a guitar player, especially a lead guitar player, a bass guitar, it
yeah,
just goes off the wall, off
yeah,
the
they play too
rails.
much. Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
it's a very common thing. I really bass has got to be probably my second favorite instrument next to guitar, because I see it as a crossover between drums and harmony. And one of my favorite bass players is Chris Squire.
Okay.
And I'm so into his playing because he never plays sticks on the tonic. He's a bit like John Paul Jones from Led Zepp as well. The bass line in Ramble On is beautiful, and it's not they're not hanging around on the tonic on the thing. It's moving. It's playing thirds and beautiful melodies. But as you said, if you start playing it like a guitar, it's no longer holding the bottom down. So you've got to keep that groove in there. I do on some of my songs, I do like 3 or 4 different tracks bass,
Okay.
and sometimes it's a keyboard bass because I don't have I'm not fortunate enough to have a fretless bass, which I'm kind of saving up for one. So I use a fretless bass on keyboard with pitch bend and stuff, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But then I'd put like a wire, I've got this Fender bass here, and that ATK as well. So this is one of my favorite basses. It's an old Fender Light. It's called.
Okay.
It's kind of a precision type of format, and I play that sometimes with my fingers, but sometimes with a pick, and combine that with keyboard bass sometimes. And just if you listen carefully to the album, you'll hear sometimes the bass sounds change, and the trick is to get them to sit it all in the track and feel the same, because the tendency is if you put a keyboard bass on, it's got a naturally big fat sound, and then sometimes a wire string bass may not have the bottom, so you've got to really mess around with the EQ and everything to get it to sit properly.
Well, yeah, that's something a lot of musicians don't really have the concept of where things sit in the track.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've just released a new single myself, and one of the things that we did, we had one bass player in mind, and then he got injured, so we brought in my go-to live player
Yeah.
for this track. And one of the complications was that my producer had me play 16th notes on the guitar all the way through the song for basically 4 minutes, and now let's
Mm.
double it. And and so my forearm was felt like it was going to fall off, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
So we had to figure out how the bass was going to sit on the track with all these 16th notes,
yeah, yeah.
and so as it happened, we recorded, I think, three different versions of the bass line. And we recorded two, and we thought the second one was it. And then my bass player is a very analytical, expressive personality.
Yeah.
And so he was basically doing the math in his head as we were sitting there in the booth. And I
Cool.
said, well, when you listen to that, is there anything that you feel like you would have done differently? Yes. Yes, there is. So
Yeah,
we re-recorded the bass, but it's again how things sit in the track. And it might not be that you're dealing with 16th notes on the guitar. It might be how the hi-hat is fitting in
yeah,
and what
exactly.
you're going to
Yeah,
do with the bass or the keyboards there. So
yeah.
it takes a special brain to be a producer.
Well, I've been doing it for a long time. I've been making records professionally for over 40 years now, right? So I won't tell you how old I am, but one of the things I have learned is that the importance of relativity in sound. So I'll give you an idea. You can have like two pieces of paper, that's white, and then but I could put something next to it that's whiter, something that wouldn't look white anymore. It's the same with frequencies. Like you get if one of the dangers is if you put something in your track that's very bright, that's a lot of high frequency, it'll make everything else sound dull, and then you're going to have to start cranking up the high frequencies on the other things to sit in with it, and that's a problem. Then you're going to run away problem where the thing's getting more and more squeaky, something. So, and it's the same with bottom end. I use Pro Tools these days to do most of my recording. Used to be a Logic man, before that Cubase on Atari, and before that 24 track analog, tape. But I find that Pro Tools gives you a lot of bottom. You got to before you start mixing, you got to go through it almost every track and filter off everything below 50 cycles.
Mm.
It's because it's all there, but you can't hear it, but it's there, and that really muddies up your perspective and your mixes. So there's little tricks I learned over the years, but you have to adapt to digital recording is a different process to analog recording.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, I got really good with my little 4-track tape recorder,
yeah.
and I
Is
thought,
that
well,
called a
this is,
Porter Studio, right? It's
yeah,
called I had one of those.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I got quite good at using that, and then all of a sudden it went digital, and I was scratching my head trying to figure out, well, how am I going to splice this or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I grew up in the analog thing, So,
yeah.
and like one example I'll give you is I made a couple of records with Mel Brooks, the filmmaker,
Okay.
and they're both kind of minor hits. One was called "To Be or Not to Be," and AKA the Hitler rap, and it's went along with the movie History of the World movie, and what was it called? To Be. There's two movies I did for him, the music for. So Mel came in the studio and he couldn't rap in time. It's he's never rapped before, so we had a really cooking track. It's like real musicians before the days of programming. It was like really hot drummer, and it's kind of a soul funk record. So in the end, I gave up trying to record him onto the 24 track with the band because it was all over the place. So I just said, well, look, why don't you just free form, and I was just going to stick it on a 1/4 inch tape. So we did that, put the voice straight onto 1/4 inch tape, and then he went home, and I had to spend days to get him into times. And the only way to do that was to put a China graph mark on the 1/4 inch, and then put it in pause. And then you go 1, 2, 3, bang, hit it on 4 before the downbeat. And then if it's late, then you have to put a new China graph mark on. If it's late, if it's early, same thing. And every line on those two records I made for him were done like that. And it just took forever. And it's all destructive too. So I had one hand on the 24 track remote control to drop in, the other hand on their quarter inch to start. So you had to go 3, 4, and then drop just at the last minute. If you drop early, you erase the previous line. You've got to do it again, right? So that's how analog recording was. And I have to tell you, I don't miss it at all because it was so time consuming.
Yeah.
And of course, they had the budgets in those days to do it. You know, like I worked on Pyromania for Def Leppard. I programmed the drums digitally on that record. Not many people knew that, and I wasn't allowed to be credited as drum programmer for obvious reasons for the fans. But that was done on a Fairlight. The same thing. It was a monophonic sampler. First machine to put. You had to put. And Mutt Langer phoned me and said, "I want the latest technology on this record. I want to use samples, which is painstakingly recorded, like the best snare sounds, the best kick drums, hi-hats before. Put all that into the Fairlight, and I had to write it all out in music composition language. This was before MIDI, and that took 6 weeks of work to get that drum tracks on that album done. So
Wow.
So I don't really miss all that because it's, you know, I mean, Mutt was very, very particular about timing. So we'd listen, literally sometimes we'd be there for 12 hours listening to a click with a hi-hat to see which way it was. You have to type in a new code to move it.
Mm.
So
Well, it's
yeah,
interesting you mentioned that there used to be budgets, to do the
yeah,
records. I spoke with Carmine Apiece a few days ago, and I don't know if you've heard the Temple of Blues record, Cactus Temple of Blues, but it is
no,
something else.
well, I'd love to see
It's
it.
an all-star album that, I mean, he's got everybody from Billy Sheehan to Joe Bonamassa and so on. But when he said he talked to Cleopatra Records, and he said, well, they suggested he do this album. And he
Yeah,
said, well, I'm going to need a budget. And I thought,
yeah.
budget? Who gets a
Was it?
budget these
That's right.
days?
That's right, exactly. Yeah, it's, well, that's what we were talking about earlier. There's, you know, why should people, the logic is, why should I pay for a recording when I can get someone to do it for free, you know?
Yeah.
And that's a big problem because it's created a lot of, I think it's lowered the quality of music a lot because they're not, it's done, a lot of it's just done on laptops, and B, there's no teamwork anymore. There used to be, when I was making records in the 80s and 70s, there was a team of people. There's a band who all like my band, Omaha Sheriff, was signed to Tony Visconti's Good Earth Records, and Tony was our producer. He's David Bowie's producer too. We would rehearse for like a whole year before going into the studio. And then when we got to the studio, there's a team, there's a great engineer, there's Tony producing it. And that's how things used to be done. But there's hardly any team spirit now in modern music. It's all just one person on a laptop, which is a little bit hollow in my opinion. So
Yeah, no kidding. It's interesting you mentioned that rehearsing for a year. I had the original drummer from Thundermug, Ed Pranskus, was my drummer for a few years,
yeah.
and we were rehearsing in pre-production for an album. And I think I looked at the clock and said, "Well, it's 4:30. I've got to hit the road." He says, "No." We've got to practice these songs until we're sick of them.
Well, that's what my favorite prog rock bands, yes, that's what they used to do. They were just like practice forever. And Bill Bruford, the original drummer of Yes, actually quit the band because he said it's just too anal. He couldn't stand it anymore. You know, they would spend forever going over and over. But what great records, though.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
that's the only way you get that.
yeah. That's my go-to favorite track when I feel like being inspired is like Close to the Edge. It's like a whole side of a album. And
Yeah.
it's just beautifully composed and performed. It's amazing.
So back to your new album for a minute. She's My Guitar. It's out now. Where can people get She's My Guitar?
Oh, if you go to Bandcamp and just type me, Bandcamp is my favorite platform because they don't block your platforms like CD Baby and some of DistroKid and all those people. When you put stuff out on those platforms, that what they do is they stick a block on it. So if you try and put a video out of the song, it'll say you can't use the audio, even though you've written the song yourself.
Ah,
I've had so much trouble with that. So I just use Bandcamp now. And the other thing about Bandcamp is they pay a lot more than the other platforms. I've sold quite a few albums and I get $20 an album. So or slightly less, but they took a small percentage. But I never got anything like that from like iTunes or Apple or anything like that. So I'm quite happy. I don't put my stuff out on the stores because I never got anything from that anyway. So
Yeah,
go to Bandcamp.
I've
Go
been
to,
flying the Bandcamp banner for years myself. Absolutely. They're for any new artists out there who are unsigned, whatever. I mean, Bandcamp is your go-to choice because if you're selling, you're getting paid.
yeah, that's right. You have the option of listening for free. You can set how many times you can listen for free on it. I think I've got 3 times on mine default, and then after that, you actually have to buy it if you want to hear it again. So I think it's pretty cool. It's working for me anyway.
Right. Yeah. So what's next for you, Chris?
Oh, good question. I'm glad you asked that. Well, as you know, I've been making records since the 70s, with really big artists. And during the 80s, I was constantly in the studio, sometimes 48 hours a day. But all the time I was doing that, I was always writing songs. But I never, because I was so busy producing, I never released any of those songs. So I thought be a great thing to actually get the songs done that I wrote in the 80s and put them out on an album next year called New Hits from the 80s. And
Okay.
that's my next project. So look out for that one. It's going to be released next summer. I've already got all the stuff all practically finished. There's 18 songs, so I have to whittle it down a bit, probably to 12. All written in the 80s and all having that 80s vibe, which is kind of in fashion again these days. So I think it's going to be a really interesting album. It's going to be a really powerful album. The songs are so strong. You can hear one or two of the songs on. One of the songs which is out on SoundCloud is called "The Voice," and it's about the voice that talks to you when you gives you good advice. We never listen to it, but it's got that. You'll hear it's got that real 80s vibe to it, and that's a preview of one of the next album. So New Hits from the 80s by Chris Birkett is coming out in 2025.
Very nice. We'll all look forward to that. Chris, I don't want to take up your whole day. I know
That's
you're a
all right.
busy man. I want to
Oh,
thank
just want to
thank
say one thing.
sure.
Is this coming out today, the interview, or is it coming out later?
The video will be within a couple of days, and then
Oh,
I
great.
will edit
Oh,
the audio and then submit it to the magazine.
could I just mention one thing then? Because
Sure.
on the 4th of October, I'm playing a really big concert here at Bathurst Quay Common. It's a brand new bit part of a park, the little Norway park. They've extended it and they're opening it up. The grain silos downtown, big silos, the old Canada malting stuff. It's all been renovated and there's a brand new park being built that's beautiful. And they've asked me to play at the opening ceremony on October the 4th. So I want to tell everybody to come down, and it's free. It's a free concert for the city of Toronto. And I'll be playing it for about an hour. And so we're doing stuff from this album and maybe a couple of tracks from the next album too.
And what time do you go on?
I'm on at 5:30, and then I'm back on again at 7. And then
Okay.
they're going to do this big display of lights. They're going to light up their silos with these beautiful lights. It's going to be a real interesting thing to come to. So I'd like to get that out to people.
Very nice. Good on you. Listen, I
Right.
want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do this with me today. And until next time, cheers.
Yeah, I'll see you for the New Hits from the 80s album. Do an interview on that.
Will do. Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a one-man production, meaning that I've done all the work, including recording, editing, guest acquisition, etc. Don't forget to look for the accompanying articles based on these interviews at 519magazine.com. The theme song for Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a clip from my original composition, The Burn, all rights reserved. If you enjoy the show and you'd like to help us keep it going, why don't you click on the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. Hit the like button, subscribe, all that stuff. We really appreciate it. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, cheers.